Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something, well, a little bit different. We're going to explore a truly fascinating alternate timeline of international sports branding and cultural semiotics. Seriously, it's a giant what-if thought experiment that completely reimagines graphic design history, all through the lens of global athletics. So, here's the core question. What if the Olympics happened every 2 years? Let's just play with this premise for a second and imagine a world where the Summer and Winter Games had a fast-paced 2-year lifespan between 1968 and 1990. This generates a whole new slate of entirely fictional host cities. You know, in our real world, these massive global events happen every 4 years, which gives design trends plenty of time to kind of shift and change in the background. But by squishing that timeline into 2-year increments, we get to see this incredibly rapid, high-speed evolution of branding. As we trace this alternate history, you'll see how real events seamlessly interweave with our fictional host years. For example, our timeline diverges right after the very real 1968 Summer Games in Mexico City and the Winter Games in Grenoble. Now, instead of waiting until 1972 for the next games, our alternate timeline drops us right into the fictional games of 1970 in New York and Turin. This setup gives us a totally unique, accelerated lens to study how graphic design evolved year by year, city by city. Here's a quick look at our itinerary for this explainer. First, the 2-year timeline we just covered. Then, we'll jump into 1970 with Liberty and Snowflakes, explore geography and culture from 74 to 78, hit the modernist shift in the 80s, and wrap up with the timeline reconverging in 1990. Let's get right into it. Section 2. 1970, Liberty and Snowflakes. Let's start our journey in 1970, where logo design leaned heavily on very literal interpretations. And wow, does this ever brilliantly illustrate that era's literal aesthetic? For the fictional Summer Games in New York 1970, it literally does not get more direct than this. We have a heavy, bold NY intertwined directly with the unmistakable torch of the Statue of Liberty. It's bold, and it leaves absolutely zero ambiguity about where these games are taking place. Then, for the Winter Games in Turin, Italy, we see a highly structured, rigid snowflake motif resting right on top of a classic serif typeface. In 1970, graphic design for these massive events was all about immediate, obvious recognition. Moving on to the years 1974 to 1978, geography and culture. As we move into the mid-70s, we see a very distinct shift happening. Take a look at the Bogotá 1974 summer logo. We start seeing a beautiful graphic integration here. We've officially moved away from those literal text-heavy designs of 1970. Instead, we have the traditional Olympic flame nestled perfectly beneath expanding sun rays and rolling mountain motifs. The design uses high contrast and striking lines to evoke the geography of Colombia. It's basically a sprawling landscape distilled into pure graphic form. Now for the Winter Games that exact same year, Stockholm's 1974 logo totally elevated the standard snowflake we saw back in Turin. Notice how it takes the distinct, vibrant colors of the Olympic rings and incorporates them directly into its icy geometry? That is an incredibly smart piece of design. Instead of just lazily placing the rings below a logo, Stockholm weaves the identity of the event into the very fabric of the winter motif itself. It creates this multicolored geometric star that honestly feels so progressive for the mid-70s. Then we hit Melbourne 1978, which masterfully blends indigenous cultural semiotics right into a modern aesthetic. If you look closely at the central design, you can actually see a stylized boomerang shape forming the base. Right above that, layered horizontal bands of color represent a glowing sunset, with the Olympic flame emerging right out of the top. It captures the heat, the landscape, and the heritage of Australia, all wrapped up in one cohesive, circular badge. And in a similar vein, Almaty 1978 delivers what I think is an absolutely brilliant visual pun. Almaty, which is historically known as the ancestral home of the apple, cleverly disguises a vibrant red apple right inside the negative space of a stark white snowflake. I mean, come on, I love this. This is exactly where graphic design gets really fun. It takes a profound cultural symbol of the region and perfectly marries it with the prerequisite winter imagery. It's one of those logos that heavily rewards you for looking just a little bit closer. So, the crucial takeaway here is that as we transition out of the 1970s, a major, undeniable aesthetic evolution occurs. Those direct, literal landmarks and obvious visual puns of the past, they begin to give way to the sleek, minimalist abstraction of the 1980s. The entire design language shifts from showing you exactly what the city is to capturing the modern energy of the era. Which brings us perfectly to 1982 to 1986, the modernist shift. Let's see how modernism, geometric precision and stylized typography take over. Just look at the stark contrast we get by 1982. Buenos Aires gives us a colorful, highly stylized geometric torch. It's built entirely out of hard angles and flat, distinct shapes of color, completely shedding the organic, flowing curves we saw in the previous decade. But then, look at Aosta 1982. This is incredibly abstract. It's a minimalist, continuous line star design. Honestly, it barely even looks like a traditional winter logo at all. It feels way more like a piece of high-end corporate identity from the early 80s. Having the confidence to use such minimal line work really perfectly encapsulates this whole modernist shift.
And by 1986, that abstraction deepens even further. Look at the Birmingham summer logo. It uses this sleek, heavy lowercase b that seamlessly intertwines with an aerodynamic flame. It is entirely typographic and highly stylized. This pairs so fascinatingly with Canberra's winter logo. Canberra utilizes a sharp, geometrically precise spear running straight down the center of a heavily stylized, almost mechanical-looking snowflake inside a circle. The thick, uniform line weights of both of these 1986 designs show a global design community that has been heavily influenced by stark industrial modernism.
Finally, we reach Section 5. 1990, the timeline reconverges. Our reimagined history concludes here with a truly fascinating historical parallel. The pairing of Tokyo and Innsbruck in our fictional 1990 timeline actually perfectly mirrors the exact same host city pairing that happened in our real world way back in 1964. Looking at these late-era designs, Tokyo features a stunningly retro-futuristic glowing sun, layered with orange and yellow bands sinking into a deep red horizon. It manages to feel simultaneously ancient and, well, totally 90s. Alongside it, Innsbruck utilizes its distinct red regional crest, segmented by super clean white lines and topped with the Olympic rings. Seeing these two cities paired together again, but rendered in the completely different design language of 1990 rather than 1964, is just a magnificent way to cap off this alternate history. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. Cultural branding has incredible power. It has the power to define an era, to capture the spirit of a city, and to freeze a moment in time, even in a timeline that never actually happened. We've seen how this design evolution went from the literal, heavy torches of New York to the minimalist, corporate geometry of Aosta, all the way to the clever negative space of Almaty. So I have to ask you, looking back at all these incredible concepts, which of these alternate history designs do you wish actually existed?